This has, without a doubt, been one of the most challenging times our community has ever faced. Throughout the coronavirus pandemic, everything has changed about the way we work, the way we interact and communicate, and the way we connect with our elected officials. There have been a lot of big decisions that City Council has faced over the last few months and will continue to face in the months ahead. So we wanted to provide an opportunity for your elected officials to connect directly with you and for you to hear from them. Welcome to Ward Updates, a series of one-on-one conversations with Ottawa City Councillors about a wide range of topics, including the city's response to the pandemic, the stories of people throughout our community who have been rising to the occasion and acting as heroes, supporting each other during this difficult time. And also some discussion around some of the big issues City Council faces going into the fall. Our guest today is Keith Egli, the City Councillor for Ward 9, Knoxdale-Merivale. Welcome to you.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? And how have you and your team and your family been coping and adapting to this unusual set of circumstances?
Well, as you can tell from my backdrop, I'm talking to you from my dining room. That's been one of the adjustments. My wife works out of the living room, and starting in a couple weeks, two of my kids are going to be doing Algonquin out of the basement. So certainly is an adjustment. COVID has changed a lot for a lot of people in the city. I think that's certainly an understatement. In my role as chair of the Board of Health, it's a subject that I've talked about pretty much every day since late winter, early spring. Meetings with Dr. Etches, meeting with Tony DeMonte in charge of our service, the mayor. It's been essentially a daily event, in addition to carrying on the normal duties of a ward councillor.
So let's talk about that. From the perspective of your role as chair of Ottawa Public Health, how do you view this pandemic and the city's response to it? What are some of the lessons arising from that?
Well, again, I'm obviously a little biased and quite immersed in the subject, but I think our city collectively has really risen to the occasion. This is, we keep saying this is unprecedented, but it certainly is. And the way that the public health team has pulled together, reorganized, and diverted its resources and its staff to the almost daily challenges that come up, the things we hadn't thought of, the new developments, whether it's the opening of school or how to reopen businesses, dealing with long-term care homes. I think it's been very impressive how public health has come together, but also how the whole city has. I've worked quite closely, as I noted, with Tony DeMonte, the head of our emergency services, with the mayor's office, with Roger Chapman in bylaw, and city manager's office, Steve Kanalakis. Everybody has come together with all the best intentions to do everything we can to help the city weather this. And, a true partner in this has absolutely been the people who live here, the residents of Ottawa. They've listened to the advice of our public health professionals. They've cooperated, they've collaborated, they've looked out for one another. And it's truly been amazing to see the way the city has pulled together. Unfortunately, it's situations like this that sometimes brings out the best in us. We have to see some of the worst things we ever have to deal with, but people really come together, and this is another example of Ottawa doing that.
No question about that, but at the same time, we also have to be introspective, and we have to assess the performance of and the response, and we have to learn from it. Even if it is the best that we could have done under the circumstances, there are always takeaways. So what are you starting to develop as themes arising from this crisis in terms of how the city can respond to these kinds of challenges in the future?
Sure. So, one of the things that we learned, I think, has been around communication. We have a very diverse city, and we need to reach out to all of our various communities. and we need to reach out to them in ways that is recognizable to them, whether it's as a result of age or gender or ethnic or cultural background. So I think we learned that we have to be quite flexible and creative in terms of how we get the message out, whether that's different messaging for different age groups, whether it's messaging in a variety of different languages. That's something that is critical so that people know how to respond, people know how to act, what's safe to do, what's not safe to do. And so I think it's certainly been a learning experience in terms of communications for the city.
What do you think is permanently altered by what's happened during this pandemic? For example, are there going to be dramatic changes to where people work? Are people going to work from home more often in the future? What will be the impact on public transit going forward? Are fewer people going to take the train and the bus, either because they're not traveling as much or because they're worried about getting an infection from other people? What do you think some of the lasting implications of this are?
Sure. I mean, there's difference of opinion on this, but this came up as we were discussing the urban boundary expansion in the city. And one of the points that I made with staff, and I brought forward a discussion point at committee and council, was that I think we have to keep our eye on the opportunities that this is going to open up, because I think people are going to continue to work from home. Not everybody, but I think when you see companies like Shopify signaling to their employees that, you know, that's our way forward and it's okay, then we have to look at all those office buildings in the core. We have to look at all those parking lots, and we have to coordinate that in terms of the housing crisis that we're having in the city. I think there are opportunities there to repurpose some of these properties, to work with developers and landowners to say, you know, you're not a commercial building anymore. The market's not there for you to be a commercial building anymore. What can we do? How can we work with you to turn this into an opportunity to create more affordable and more diverse living spaces within the city? So I think I'm in the camp that thinks that the way we work has changed fundamentally. And while some people will go back to the office, and while some people will be comfortable doing that, I think a lot of people learned you can work quite effectively from your home. And some people have really decided that that's the way for them. Some businesses have decided that that's the way for them. So I think that is a permanent change that we're going to see. In terms of the transit issue that you raised, Mark, that certainly is a challenge. We have to find a way to make people feel comfortable on transit. Again, we have to find a way to create that synergy that people who are going to go back to work and who are going shopping and to the doctors and the university and everything else, who don't have necessarily other options, that they feel safe and comfortable in transit. We have to do it for our environment, it's a big piece of work for John Manconi and his team, and we have to focus on that going forward, because again, some people simply can't afford to get around town in other ways. Some people don't want to get around town in other ways because they do have concerns around the environment and the impact of owning a car and driving to and from work every day, or school, or wherever you're headed. So that, I don't know what the answer to that is at this point, but it certainly it can be pinpointed as a significant challenge for the city, and the one that we have to look at from a whole variety of different perspectives.
Let's talk more about public transit and light rail. You were, as many city councillors were before the launch of phase one, a big proponent of light rail. It has not gone well, to say the least, in the first year, and in some ways, the pandemic has taken some of the pressure off the system while some of the issues have been sorted out. What lessons do you take away from what happened with light rail? The fact that it was delivered late, and the fact that even after it was launched, there were so many problems.
Well, you're not wrong. This is not the package we thought we were going to open up. This isn't what we thought we were buying. And so I hopefully what we've learned from that is that we have to be more hands-on on phase 2 and phase 3 and so on. That doesn't mean that the people sitting around the council table are going to design the system or going to run the system. We're not engineers. We're not transit specialists, but we have to build a better bridge with whatever company consortium is putting the product out there. We have to make them understand from the get-go that we want to get and we need to get the product that we paid for. I think staff, you're quite right, COVID has created an opportunity, if you will, when a lot of people are not using the system, so that more testing can be done, more repairs can be done, more fixes can be put in place while the system is not anywhere near capacity. But I'm still a proponent of light rail. I think it's important for the growth of our city. I think it's important, as I said earlier, for the environment in our city. And so I'm still a booster for light rail. We need to get it right. And again, I think one of the ways to do that is a bit more hands-on. Again, not in terms of design and what have you, but in terms of more robust communications earlier on from the very beginning between the city and whichever proponent is building whichever phase we're engaged in. We have to keep those. We have to need to know when problems are coming down the pipe. I can assure you that the companies that work together to put light rail in, I can't imagine they're any happier with the situation. From a reputation perspective, and when they're out in the marketplace, they're selling their services, they want to be known as companies that can get the job done. So I think there's a joint interest in better communications, better cooperation going forward, and talking about issues or problems that may arise much earlier on and addressing them earlier on.
I suppose that's the case, but wasn't that joint interest there before? I mean, wasn't there a risk of reputational damage based on all the things that have actually happened in the last year? That didn't seem to be an incentive to stop those things from happening, nor were the financial consequences, obviously.
No, and fair comment. I do think the financial consequences have had an impact. We've seen changes recently, as you know, where there's been a change in the leadership of the company that we're working with in Ottawa, and that seems to be going well. I think part of the issue was whenever these systems operate and open up, many light rail systems across the world have issues, have problems. We thought we had the optimum system. We thought we had the world-class system where everything would be perfect from day one. We've learned that's not the case. So again, it's about communications, it's about messaging, it's about expectations, and I think better lines of communication with our partners in this and with the citizens of Ottawa is absolutely the way to go.
All right, let's turn back to the coronavirus pandemic for a moment. We're moving into a different time now. The temperatures are getting cooler. Kids are returning to school. Some people are returning to work. The people who have been gathering outdoors may feel compelled to move indoors with their gatherings. There are lots of changes that are afoot this fall, and we might be moving into a new season of the traditional annual flu. So what are some of the considerations that public health officials are thinking of right now, and what does the public need to be mindful of going into the fall?
Well, I think one of the things that absolutely the public has to be mindful is this is not over. We've had good success in the city in grappling with this, in flattening the curve, but it's not gone away. And it's not going to go away next week or next month. So we have to focus on continuing to do what we're doing, as public health says, be COVID wise. We have to do all the things that we've been doing. We have to physically distance. We have to wash our hands. We have to wear a mask when we're not able to physically distance, when we're inside, for example. These are all things that we have to keep on keeping on. they're simple things, or things that everybody can do, and they're things that have resonated with the residents of Ottawa and have allowed us to be as successful as we have been so far in dealing with COVID. So you're right, temperature's going to get colder. It's, now we can walk down the street, we can talk to neighbors and friends on at either end of the driveway. We're not going to be as open to doing that when it's minus 25 and wind chill factor of minus 37. So it's important that we keep doing all the things that we've been doing, and we don't let up on that. It's very important that people get vaccinated this year for the flu and take all proper precautions. One of the interesting things, Mark, that we've seen in Australia, for example, where they're on our flip side, and they're in their flu season right now, they're having an exceptionally good flu season. And by that, I mean the rates of hospitalization, the number of cases of flu are way down from what they normally are. And that's because people are practicing COVID practices of doing the distancing, wearing the mask, washing the hands, keeping to their bubbles. So the benefit of continuing to do that should also help us rein in the flu that we traditionally would be dealing with at this time of year. But again, it's vitally important that people do get the vaccination this year against the flu. That's going to be a big push by public health as we move forward into the fall. And then the other piece of public health is working on, of course, is how can we be there to support children and their parents as they go back to school. I'd like to say to you that we're not going to have people get sick at school, and there aren't going to be cases, but in all likelihood there will be some cases coming out of the school system. And so public health is there to support the families. Again, we'll put as many resources as we possibly can up on our website. We'll continue to do our regular media availabilities and share that information, share it with parents, share it with counselors to get out to their various social media channels. So it's the simple things that are going to get us through the winter. We're going to ask people to continue to be patient, continue to cooperate. And again, I can't thank the people in Ottawa enough for how they've responded to this crisis, and they have listened to the advice of our medical professionals, and we've seen the benefit of that, and I'm very hopeful that people will continue to follow that advice and get us through the winter.
As I mentioned, it's been an unusual time, obviously, particularly around how members of the community communicate with their elected officials. So this is an opportunity for you maybe to give an update on some of your priorities for Knoxdale-Merivale Ward. Could you just give us a sense of what you're working on and what some of the key issues are going forward?
Sure, thank you for that. And we've been continuing to meet with our community associations, for example, much like we're doing here, Mark, on Zoom or with Teams, on Microsoft, and sharing as much information as we can through our social media channels. But it's been a challenge because, of course, you can't have large community meetings, for example, about developments that might be occurring and that sort of thing. So some of the positive things that have happened in the ward over the last few months is we've had some major work done at a number of our parks, either refreshing them or putting in additional amenities like splash pads. We're putting in splash pads at Charing Park and at Banner Park, which is actually not Banner Park anymore. We recently renamed the park after George Brancato, of course. Famous Rough Rider coach that brought the Grey Cup to Ottawa, and that was something the community was very much behind. We renamed the football field at the Sportsplex after Sandy Ruxtall, who was a fixture in amateur sport and football in the city for youth for the last 30 odd years. Just a very inspiring individual who passed away a number of years ago, and again, very well received by the community. In terms of issues that are impacting the ward, we're talking about what the wards might look like going into the next election. And I want to thank my community for the feedback I've received from them and the good work the community associations have done in providing me with background on where they would like to see things go as we have our discussions around ward boundaries and what changes may come from there. So there are a lot of things happening in that regard. Some of the challenges that we still face, the city is in the midst of a legal matter around a motel on Prince of Wales, which has become a magnet, unfortunately, for criminal behavior, drug use, and that's something which is going to be going to court this fall, and something which a number of my communities are very impacted by and are very concerned about the results. And the city is attempting to have the location shuttered and shut down to deal with the problem, because we've sent police, we've sent paramedics, bylaw, and at some point the drain on the resources becomes a point where we have to try something different. So this is a legal application that's only been tried a couple of times in the province before, and that will be going forward in the fall. And I know a lot of people in my community are concerned about how that's going to roll out and what the result will be. So those are some of the things that we're working on.
All right, I want to talk about the city budget, because that's coming up this fall as well. And of course, because of the pandemic, there are significant pressures on the city's finances. Transit fares are way down, obviously. There are other costs that have gone up. So what do you see as the solution? There is some money coming from other levels of government, but that won't cover the shortfall. So is the city going to have to raise taxes beyond the 3% cap that Jim Watson, the mayor, proposed in the last municipal election, or cut services, or is there some other answer?
So yeah, no, that's an excellent question, and it's going to be a significant challenge. I mean, at public health alone, we're looking at a deficit of anywhere from $8 to $12 million this year, depending on how the fall goes, in terms of whether we see spikes in COVID and how the flu season goes. And you're quite right, our revenues for transit are way down. On the flip side of that, of course, we have a lot of residents who have not been fortunate enough to be able to work from home, or their businesses have slowed down or closed down. So we know that people are hurting as well financially, and don't want to take a further increase in taxes. So we've tasked our city manager with looking at the city writ large, trying to find where some of those efficiencies might be. But again, keeping in mind that we have to continue to provide all those core services. One of the things that they're looking at as well is the state of our reserves, whether reserve funds can be used to bolster us through this year. And of course, the mayor, and on behalf of council, continues to lobby the other levels of government. And with some significant success, there have been some announcements about monies coming from other levels of government to assist. And we're hoping that there will be further announcements in that regard. So I think we're going to do everything we can, Mark, to not put a further financial burden on the residents of Ottawa, if that can be achieved. And again, we'll do that, I think, through lobbying the other levels of government, looking at our reserves, which of course will have to be built back up. But reserves are there for a reason. They're there to get us through these tough times. So those are the sorts of things that we're looking at now.
I want to talk about policing in Ottawa. What is your perspective on the discussion that has evolved around defunding the police and reallocating resources to mental health services and other social services, rather than have the police respond with law enforcement in situations where it may be a mental health issue? This arises, of course, out of a much broader discussion, but so I'm talking about one aspect of it. There's also the issue of systemic racism. So what are your thoughts on all of that? Is there a different approach to law enforcement that we need to take going forward?
I do think we need to take a hard look at how we do policing in the city. I don't think anybody really wants to defund in the sense of taking all the money away from police services, but I think what people really want is police to be done in a different way, and that the end is not always more boots on the ground and the traditional we think of policing. So there are models in various cities across North America and Europe where they do partner up. You may have a police officer and a social worker or a mental health worker, crisis intervention professional involved, as opposed to just having police officers. And I think in Chief Slowly, there's a willing partner to have those discussions, to look at how policing can be done differently. I think we need more of a focus on community policing. We moved away from that in recent years. That was not something that I was supportive of, moving away from the community policing model, and I know a lot of my colleagues weren't as well. It's something that the police administration wanted to try and went forward with. I think they've realized that what they were trying to do didn't really work, and they're moving back towards a more of a community policing model. And I think that's critical. If you can build those lines of communication, if you can put a face on policing as opposed to a squad car, then you will have that connection with the community. It will work better. People will be more prepared to report things, will be more prepared to work with the police to address problems earlier on. So I think the fix is in how we do policing, and I think there has to be partnerships between the police and other types of professionals going forward to make that work. And again, it's early days, but I think Chief Slowly recognizes that and is prepared to have those discussions. And I look forward to the return of my colleague, Councillor Deans, to once again take over as chair of the Police Services Board for her perspective on this issue and suggestions and options she might have to put on the table. So I think the discussion is very much a live one, and I think there's a lot of interest in getting at this issue and doing it differently.
All right. Keith Eglai, we'll have to stop there, but I appreciate you joining us today. Once again, thank you for your time, and good luck to all of your constituents and to you and your family and your team in the months ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you again, Mark, even if virtually. Bye-bye.
Same here. Keith Eglai, who is the City Councillor for Ward 9, Knoxdale-Merivale. That concludes our ward update. Thank you for watching.